The Denver Nuggets are the NBA champs. And this week, and since the All-Star break, they are reminding the rest of the NBA they're ready to do it again. And the Jazz were the victim tonight. It's next on POSTCAST.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, the Utah Jazz came to Denver without Lauri Markkanen, their best player, against the Denver Nugget team that beat the Boston Celtics the other night, had won 7 of 8 since the All-Star break. And this game went kind of as you would anticipate, though I'll be honest, worse than I anticipated, only out of a little bit of the lack of resistance I saw from the Jazz and the lack of force from the Jazz on both ends of the floor. We'll talk about that. But the overriding theme tonight is the Denver Nuggets jump out to a 13-4 lead. They lead at 38-22 at the end of one. They lead by 39 at one point in the first half, which would have led to the largest comeback in the history of the NBA, which was set by the Jazz in 1996, if you might not have heard, against the Denver Nuggets. So it felt like there was a chance. Jazz gave us a little fun third quarter with 44 points, Keontae having, I think, 16 of them in the quarter. And then the Jazz ended up losing it in a blowout, 142-121. Let's start with the Nuggets. That starting five has played the most minutes together of any starting five in the NBA. They have won a title together. They are plus 14 when they're together. Jokic is the best player in the world. He went 12 of 14 tonight with 26 points. Jamal Murray and he are the best two-man unit, and they dominated.
Their system all starts with Jokic. I mean, he brings the ball up the floor. I mean, even after a made basket, I mean, they give it to him, he brings the ball up the floor, and he makes things happen. Guys know where to go out there on the offense, whether they're spotting up or they're running a back door. But I'm so impressed and more impressed, I think, now, Jokic, because I was watching his head. I mean, when he's just surveying and where he's going to make a pass, where the double's going to come from, and he's almost ahead of every play that's happening out there on the floor.
I was going to ask you this question on the broadcast, but then I got distracted. For those who listen to the broadcast tonight, they thank you, Lacey. Anybody else, you'll know what I mean. Here's a question I have for you about Nikola Jokic.
Okay.
Is he the greatest point guard in NBA history?
It's a good point. Is he the greatest power forward in the NBA? Is he the greatest two guard in the NBA? I mean, his game, he does it all. I mean, the only thing he doesn't do is beat you off the dribble from 15 feet away from the basket.
We talked a lot about Jokic. Great comments from Will Hardy before the game about his comparison to Tim Duncan. It was a great line. They come, they play, they win, they go home. Mm-hmm. He also talked about like they effortlessly control the game. It's what he does. What's so interesting about him in the way Jokic is going. If you just, I mean, fine, he's a 6-time All-Star. He's about to be a 3-time MVP with a decent chance of being a 2-time champ. Like you start to vault into really elite air when you're doing things like that. Like Akeem Olajuwon to me is maybe still the most underrated player in the history of the NBA. But like your resume is now better than Akeem's if you become a 3-time MVP and a 2-time champion.
I think his resume is just as good as Akeem's right now. I mean, because he does things that Akeem was not a guy that got a lot of assists.
Right.
I mean, he could rebound. Only thing Akeem probably did more or better than Jokic right now was block shots. And Jokic, he just does everything else well. But I think Jokic makes his teammates better. It makes it maybe not better, but makes their game easier than I think Akeem Olajuwon did.
All right, from a Jazz standpoint, here's my problem tonight. And we had all sorts of technical difficulties early in the game, so it's actually probably one where I should rewatch before I make a lot of comments because it's hard to tell when you and I aren't going back and forth about the game, what was going on. But what I was watching was the Jazz couldn't get into their offensive sets. They took no force. Like, if you come down the floor and you play with force and you make hard cuts and you do things, you'll get into your offense. We didn't do that at all. Denver's good defensively, and they've actually become one of the most physical teams in the NBA. But I just thought we came up the floor and just Denver was just hitting us, and we were just back on our heels and I guess the word soft. I hate that word, but you know what I'm saying. That's what I saw from an offensive standpoint, and we'll touch on defense. I'm about to say the same thing about the defense in a moment, but let's start with the offense.
Well, and you could tell the Jazz were struggling because of operating late in the shot clock. And that has a lot to do with the defense of the Nuggets. And just think about that. Jokic is not a shot blocker. So their perimeter defense kept the Jazz from getting into their offense, and they really struggled that first half. And then they struggled on the defensive end on the other end of the floor because the number of uncontested three-point shots that the Nuggets were able to come up with.
All right, so let's go to that. On the defensive side, like, there was a play. I'm not isolating John Collins. I'm just using this play. Okay. Everyone is victim of this. But there was a play where, like, John Collins fouled him. And you said, well, we might as well foul him if we're not going to let him lay it so he doesn't lay it up. Yeah. The problem was that the first contact John Collins made with Jokic on the play was the foul in the rim, and Jokic got it at 15 feet, and we were, like, backing off him. And he just would work his way in, and we never put up any resistance. But we didn't do that to any cutter or any mover or anything all night. There was no physicality or defensive resistance to anything the Nuggets were doing tonight.
There's a such thing as being beaten before the game starts.
It's a great way to say it. Yeah.
And I think that's what we were.
And the Jazz coach, like, bummer for me on that one is the Jazz coaches took him through shoot around. Will set the standard of, like, we're playing to win. It's harder. We're playing young kids and all that. But, like, I don't know Will Hardy's press conference is going to be tonight. He's not going to be – I don't think he's going to be effusive about Keontae George's 16-point third quarter. I don't think he's going to be talking about Bryce Sensabaugh's 16-point game. I certainly am positive he's not talking about Jordan Clarkson's 22 irrelevant points in the fourth quarter. I am 100% certain he's talking about the lack of urgency to start the basketball game.
Without a doubt. And he should. He called a timeout, and you can see he was so upset that he went to the official, to keep from trashing a player that's walking off the floor. But he went to the official, and then he gets into the huddle to try to slow the machine down from the Denver Nuggets.
The other one, and I'm not trying to pound on us. We just lost the world champs. They're way better than us. And so I'm not. But, like, if we're just going to be honest about it, like, it's one thing. It's okay that if you don't win a bunch of games. It's okay if you lose to Chicago on a Colin Sexton 3. It's okay if you go to Orlando and Miami and lose. And Denver's better than all those teams. They're really great. And I think they're actually – I still not entirely sure we realize how great they are. Like, if you go back and look at their NBA Finals run last year, there are not many – I think they did it in 21 games, I think is the right number. I think they only lost 5 along the way. There are not many teams in NBA history that have ever walked through the playoffs and got that done in 21 games. So I think – Jokic is still better than we realize. Jamal Murray has risen to top 15 player in the NBA. Their roster is perfectly constructed, at least last year. Their benches, we'll see how it turns out this year. So let me understand. However, let me also say this. Like, we can be as young as we want, and I don't know exactly what the lineups were in the second quarter, but they come out on the floor with Jamal Murray, Christian Brown as a second-year player, Peyton Watson, who didn't play at all in his first year as a second-year player, Justin Holiday, who's a journeyman NBA player, and Zeke Naji, who's not good. Has not been good in his NBA career, and they kicked our ass 19-7 to open that quarter. Like, that's not okay. Like, those are the things that Will Hardy's going to say in this process is not okay, is that, hey, it's one thing if I got no problem, and maybe your point is like this game was over beforehand. I got no problem if Aaron Gordon, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, and whoever their fifth starters, who I'm forgetting right now just because Michael Porter Jr., if they come in and kick our ass, I got no problem. They've played the most minutes together as a 5-man unit. They're plus 18 on the year. They've won an NBA title together. They bond through the playoffs. They're so gorgeous to watch. I mean, they're so gorgeous to watch. But I do have a problem when you've just allowed 38 points in the first quarter and they kick your ass to start the second quarter.
In other words, you're saying the Jazz just didn't play hard.
Yes.
Didn't follow the game plan defensively. And as a result, the Nuggets ended up with 39 assists.
Right, they scored 78 points in the first half of the game.
In the first half. Now, for the most part, the Nuggets are at full strength.
Oh, they're rolling.
Yeah,
they're ready to go.
The Jazz are not as good, and then they're really not as good because Markin is not playing.
Right.
They're trying to elevate and get Taylor as much experience as possible, and so from that standpoint, Nuggets should win.
Nuggets
the problem you're
right.
thinking is you got to play hard.
Yes, the Nuggets should have beat us tonight. There's no question. And my point is really that starting 5 should hammer us. Like, yeah. I actually have little problem with like the opening 12 minutes. Jokic is on the floor and they beat us by 16. Like our offense is struggling. They had a 160 offensive rating. That's a little high, but they went nuts and made 7 of 10 from 3. I really just don't like the 19-7 stretch to open the second quarter when Murray's off the floor. They're for the season in that lineup. They're minus 18 per 100 possessions. Like they haven't had success against anyone all year with that lineup. All right, this is not a night to beat up the Utah Jazz. They come in here shorthanded. Denver's the world champs, the NBA champs. Denver's going to be the NBA. I think Denver's going to be the NBA champs again because Jokic is the best player in the world, and they've got it figured out. I'm just not quite sure Boston has enough to beat this group. And I also think Boston, just side note, Boston is eerily close to like the most miserable playoff run ever. If they're not careful, you kind of look at it like they could very easily end up with like Philly in the first round and Miami in the second round and just be exhausted by the time they see Milwaukee and then have Denver after that. Whereas I actually think Denver is going to march through the Western Conference. Like this whole thing's been cute about the Clippers and Minnesota and Oklahoma City. Denver's going to kill these teams.
I think Oklahoma City, they're young, and I don't think they can beat Denver. Clippers, I think the Clippers can beat them, but the Clippers have to play well. And as talented and as many good players that they have on that team, I can say they have to play well to beat them.
Yes.
Even though they have a lot of more talent, probably. They have to play well to beat them.
I'm going to throw a wild card here. I do agree the Clippers are the Nuggets' biggest problem. I don't know why, but I somehow think New Orleans is going to cause the Clippers a lot of problems in the first round.
Okay.
If that's the matchup, like I don't know who deals with Zion.
Yeah.
And then and then is James Harden running around following CJ McCollum? Like I just feel like that's a super bad matchup for the Clippers. Now maybe New Orleans is so inconsistent, and I'm not sure Willie Green can outdo Ty Lue, but we'll have more time to talk about. All right, stars tonight. Do we go to 96 and give the stars to Chris Morris and Brian Russell like Lacey suggests?
That's probably the best idea ever. Whose idea was that?
Lacey.
Lacey got it. You got
Brian Russell hammer dunk off the Karl Malone give late. Chris Morris with the flurry that brought the Jazz back to the biggest win in comeback history.
Absolutely.
That is for those of you who do not know, and I'm not sure whether you should do about this, there is a podcast. Actually, here's the story if you really want it. There is a podcast called Utah Jazz Radio. We put up the entire broadcast on that podcast. And tonight, for the final 18 minutes of the broadcast, dyslexia became my friend. I've had to live with it my whole life, and it's not always been my friend. But dyslexia became my friend tonight, and I called simultaneously, like Ronald Reagan off the ticker tape, the 1996 Jazz comeback win and the game that was going on in front of us. Actually, from this broadcast site, I'm about as close to both of them. So it was fine. Thanks to the crew in Denver here tonight. We had a tough night, and they battled, and we got through it. And the Jazz didn't play very well. And we relived the 96 comeback win in Jazz 50. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Here, we're sending you the first ever 24/7 national stream Locked On Sports Today. Hope you enjoy.